Israel's Minister of Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, recently weighed in on the horrific situation overtaking the region. Let's watch.
I think it's scores of hostages. I can tell you there's also American hostages as part of that number as well. I don't want to get into a specific number, but these are women, they're children, they're elderly, they're Holocaust survivors. This is sick.
Israeli citizen, mother of three, Batsheva Genut Iluz, joins us now from Israel to discuss what is happening there. You're in Tel Aviv, is that right?
No, I'm actually in Maskeret Batya, which is a small village about 39 kilometers from the border with Gaza.
Okay, can you describe what you're observing now?
Absolutely. At this moment, early Saturday morning, it started. We started with a barrage of missile and rocket fire at about 6:30 in the morning. Unfortunately, I was on a run before synagogue. So I was about 8 kilometers away from home in the middle of open space with red alert sirens and missiles falling around me with 3 children home. So it was difficult to get back there safe and sound, but I did. And we spent the majority of that day going in and out of our safe room, our bomb shelter, which is located, we're very lucky, in our home. Many people don't have shelters in their home and they need to leave and run for shelters that are public or, not located so close to where they are. So we spent the day like that. And we've had less sirens over the past 2 days, but of course we've had the horrific stories that just continue to pour out of southern Israel, just about 30 minutes from where I live. And it just really just keeps getting worse and worse. It's heartbreaking for everyone here and I think everyone around the world.
What was the sign that it was safe to spend time outside of the bomb shelters again?
We have really, they're very well prepared here with very clear instructions. So when there is a possibility that a missile can land somewhere near where you are, there is an air raid siren that goes off, and that gives you a signal that you need to move to your bomb shelter. And depending on where you live, you have a specific amount of time to get there. So if you're on the border with Gaza, you might have less than 5 seconds, whereas I have about a minute. So that's a long time to gather yourself, your children, your pets, and get them in the bomb shelter. And then you're requested to stay in for 10 minutes until after the siren stops. And then you're all clear to come out. And you might go back and forth, 15 times within an hour.
We've seen a number of statements about what the character of the response is going to be. Israeli Defense Minister recently said, for example, that he's ordered a, quote, complete siege on the Gaza Strip. There'll be no electricity, no fuel, no food. Everything is closed. What do you make of the response? And are you concerned that more escalation is going to lead to more unstable conditions for residents of Israel?
I have to be honest with you. I think right now, most of the residents of Israel, all of our eyes are on the south, and all of our eyes, we have kidnapped, we have missing, we have wounded, we have bodies that haven't been collected. And I think that's where everybody's efforts and responses are going, how to end the gun battles that are happening now, how to regain control of the kibbutzim and the moshavim, the Israeli neighborhoods and small villages, and make sure, it's house to house. It's make sure everyone's safe, or make sure those who are not safe and who are no longer with us, that their bodies are collected and that they will be able to get proper burial. This is a nation that's been striving for peace for so long. And what we're seeing today, everyone's calling it a war, but it's not a war. What we've seen in the past 2.5, 3 days already it's a slaughterhouse, it's a massacre, it's mass executions, it's killing of children in front of their parents, killing of parents and kidnapping of children. I think my personal mind right now as a mother of 3 children who's trying to keep everyone safe and sane, which is another really big component to all of this, and make sure that your children aren't scarred for the rest of their life, is how to get through the next hour and not looking so far forward at this point.
Is there shock that this happened? Obviously, the region, Israel, is no stranger to attacks, to conflict. Is there a sense that the government was unprepared, that the administration didn't know this was coming, the intelligence failures occurring? Can you describe the kind of emotional mindset? I know it's just happened, and there's going to be time for that kind of processing to take place.
Absolutely. But I think you're absolutely right. I think there's 2 different feelings here. One is shock, And nobody thought that anything like this was possible, and no one could imagine anything like this happening. So there's that element. And like you say, people are saying there'll be a time to investigate and figure out what went wrong. And even though Israel has taken a terrible hit, I mean, there's been nothing like this in the history of the country. We're talking about civilians and families and young children and elderly. I mean, who kidnaps an 85-year-old woman and babies without parents? I mean, it's a tragedy among tragedies, but at the same time, we also have an incredible resilience. I mean, what you see here are not people running away, but people running toward. I mean, we have our sons and our daughters and our neighbors and everyone in uniform flowing towards the danger zone to protect their families back at home in their country, flowing up north. And I think that the resilience of the civilians is unbelievable. You just have an outpouring. There's more volunteers than need for assistance. You know, I have my older children making food for soldiers, volunteering to clean public bomb shelters and stock them with water and snacks. You have people bringing to army bases what's needed for soldiers, people taking care of the elderly or of young mothers whose husbands have been called up. So what you have is an entire nation full of fortitude, full of resilience, and full of a will to live peacefully in this land. So it's kind of existing side by side.
Batsheva, how long have you lived in Israel, and can you give us a sense of how it's changed and what you've experienced during your time there?
Sure. I'm actually from Baltimore, Maryland. I grew up close by to where all of you are, and I moved here about 20 years ago. I have lived in several different places. I've lived in small villages. I've lived in beautiful Tel Aviv by the beach. And again, now I'm living in a smaller village in the south. And I think that the amount of resilience, I mean, when I moved here, buses were being bombed in Jerusalem. And, you know, we've been through issues, like you've said. Israel is no stranger to conflict, unfortunately, no stranger to terrorism, definitely a stranger to massacres, slaughterhouse, and bloodbath, but not a stranger to wars, to conflict, and to terrorism. And I think the country's always been resilient. I mean, everybody's watched as there's been internal disagreement among different political parties and people in this country, but I think that kind of gets erased in an instant when your survival's at stake.
So I'm curious, as someone who is a relatively more recent newcomer to the country, what do you say to folks who might look at the ongoing displacement of Palestinians in the occupied territories that have been pointed to as a root cause of this conflict? What do you say to people who might be somewhat sympathetic to that and unsympathetic to the idea that people should be able to participate in that displacement and to lay claim to land where Palestinians don't have equal rights under the law?
Well, I mean, it's very difficult for me to answer the question. You know, I think we need to look at two different things. When Al-Qaeda bombed the World Trade Center in New York, the Twin Towers in New York, where I was there, and right now what's happening in Israel really reminds me of the days after the Twin Towers fell. I mean, people walking around the streets, holding up notices of pictures of their missing relatives, you know, looking for any shred of information. Nobody called Al-Qaeda a militant group. And when ISIS committed the terrible attacks that they did in Paris, nobody called them militants. And I think we need to have a really big separation here. Israel's entered into peace processes again and again with the Palestinian people. Israel has had, you know, look at the Oslo Accords, look at our prime minister that was murdered because of it. We have entered into so many processes and have been ready so many times to make peace. And I think to talk about or to even suggest any kind of the reason that this is happening and that we've dragged families out of their homes and gunned them down, mothers, fathers, young children, because of a political disagreement, it doesn't work. You know, we've entered into peace process and we always try. And people say there's never been more of a nation who's missed opportunities to miss an opportunity. And I don't think that we can blame the situation that the Palestinians are under on the Israeli government. I think we have to look to their leaders first.
Batsheva, thank you for joining us, and please stay safe.
Okay, thank you very much. And let's all just hope for peace in this region and all over the world, everyone who needs it.